Okay, I'm going to move on now to questions from the United States. Let me just say that in the wake of last night's events in Wisconsin, we have a lot of questions regarding what occurred there, expressions of outrage, etc. I don't have time to ask all of them. There is one thing that was brought to our attention by a national labor leader who is more thoughtful and more militant than the leadership of the labor movement generally in the United States, and certainly more so than in Wisconsin. So I will take his question, and I'm going to go through some others. Before I get to that, let me just comment. Someone in the audience asked a question regarding NWOPA, saying, you know, NWOPA's great, it sounds promising, but it'll take years to get off the ground, and isn't there something else we could do immediately? That's wrong. We could get NWOPA off the ground tomorrow. And if you doubt me, you can talk to any member of the basement team, and I'm sure they'd be happy to explain it to you. But it's not something that is years into the future. Okay, now on Wisconsin, I trust that people here are aware of what occurred late last night. And what is posed in this question is our friend says, Mr. LaRouche, I think that ultimately what occurred in Wisconsin last night is that the truth won out. Governor Walker and the Republican senators proved what we had been saying all along, which is that their actions had absolutely nothing to do with the state budget and had everything to do with ending collective bargaining for most public sector unions. I think that they made an erroneous assumption that they could cloak their intent to break the unions in the budget negotiations. But now it is clear that that emperor has no clothes. The only thing that he has succeeded in doing is doing what Democrats in Washington and many of my fellow labor officials failed to do, which is he has successfully mobilized the Democratic base in Wisconsin and actually across the country. And for that, many people will pay dearly. But there is a more important question that I wanted you to comment on, because what is going on in Wisconsin, this attempt to end collective bargaining, is also something which is on the legislative agenda in more than 30 states. It is also coupled, again, under the guise of reducing budgets and balancing state budgets, with various pieces of legislation which are now active in 12 states to reduce the size of state legislatures. This is particularly alarming because the creation of much larger legislative districts would make it extremely difficult for independents to seek those seats. It would introduce a requirement of large sums of money, and it would also, without question, alienate individuals from access to their legislators, something that state legislators have as a great advantage over members of Congress. It is our view that ultimately this must be looked at as a national effort, which is nothing short of an attack on the Constitution, and that in fact we saw signs of this earlier in the year when various Republican members of Congress stood up and attacked the Constitution. In the midst of the crisis that we face today and the crises that we are to face in the immediate weeks ahead, this is something that I'd really like your thoughts on. Also, just as a secondary question, looking at the action in Wisconsin and looking at what I expect will be an attempt to repeat such action in places like Ohio, one thing that does greatly concern me is that what we have discussed as a mass strike process could turn very ugly very quickly without adequate leadership. And I was wondering if you would comment on the possibility for this. So far, what has gone on without violence and without anarchy, but I don't know how long that will hold.
Well, first of all, the people behind this are for the violence. They are deliberately moving to incite it and to create it and to launch it. Typical British trick. But this character from Whisk Walker is dumber than Mussolini. And probably more crude. I mean, he's a guy who's consumed by one thing, his egotistical ambition. He's shown no brain power whatsoever in anything he's done. He's a puppet of some string pullers, because no man of any political intelligence would do what he's done. He makes Louis XIV seem like a genius. So he's doomed. And the question is, are we going to get chaos? No, we're not going to get dictatorship. There are going to be attempts at dictatorship, which this is one. This is plain fascism. That's all it is. This is Hitler. You look at the healthcare policies of the Obama administration, which are from that degenerate Tony Blair of Britain, one of the worst and slimiest degenerates I know on this planet today, who I've run into, who's my enemy, and for whom I have generous contempt, if anything at all. He's nothing. He's a degenerate. They killed a man. Oh, David Kelly. He's an honest man, although a Brit. But you've got to give credit sometimes when they're honest. He's an honest man who got involved with me, not by directly. I was invited on the BBC at the relevant point because I was known to be an expert on the question of the war in Iraq. So I was invited twice on the BBC evening radio to present these views. And then that infuriated the Brits, who hate me anyway, particularly that crowd, Blair crowd. And then you had David Kelly stepped in and said, this is a crap. This whole claim about these weapons is a crap. There's no truth to it whatsoever. And he said it plainly. And they killed him. And then the Blair government arranged to have a special proceeding take place, violating all British law at the time, to declare that it was a suicide, period. And all the evidence is now is it wasn't a suicide. Simply because it would have been impossible for him to kill himself in the way described. And also, somehow, miraculously, the dead body had been moved, which certainly could not have been an act of suicide. That's typical of this. And this Blair is exactly that type. And this guy is a reflection, this crazy, ambitious nut, who is partly should be dismissed because of insanity. It's too bad we don't have the fourth stipulation of the 25th Amendment to apply to governors of states. We could chuck him out on that right away. It's insane. Just carry him off to the relevant institution and that's be done with it, the process. But no, you have a group of actual American fascists who are British directed, who are playing a game, and what they're looking for is they're looking for a bloody chaos within the entire U.S. population. Because he's not the author of this. He's the tool of it. He's a stupid jerk, a disgusting creature. He has no civility whatsoever. He doesn't belong among human beings. He should belong in some kind of a zoo where you keep them away from children, that sort of thing. No, he's not a serious person. He's only a tool. He's a whore looking for an customer. That's what he is. But the danger is that he's a whore like many others of his type, the same type of political whore, prostitute. who is doing something, who doesn't know what the hell he's doing, but I do, because I know who's causing him to do it. This guy is a stinking fascist, a cheap imitation Mussolini of Wisconsin. And he's going to end up probably for the nearest voluntary guillotine available to deal with him, because he's not headed in the right direction. No, I don't treat the guy as serious. He's a serious disease. He's not a serious person. He's just a man who has a very perverted kind of ambition, who is being funded by a known group who've deployed him in the aftermath of this Republican achievement in the House of Representatives this past time, November 2nd. He's a piece of filth. The sooner we get him out of there, the better. But what he's up against is an international mass strike movement of a type which has not been seen in human experience in a very long time. You just look at the facts. Just look at it. Alles gut? Okay. So it should be treated accordingly. What we have to do is, we've got a mass strike movement in process. We have to serve it, support it, assist it, so forth. We have to realize that the most precious people are these teachers and their students there. We know this thing is spreading. It's going to spread in Ohio. And you're headed for a bloody confrontation between these forces and the people. In this kind of situation, under the present circumstances, I would say the guillotine will probably win. And wherever they're headed, it may be without their body. Hang on.